approval of the minutes for the April 12th meeting. Is there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
Move to approve is written.
One second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Beth.
Carried.
We don't want you to hide behind there.
Can't see over that, is that the problem?
Yeah, I can, that's my excuse. She thought I was uncovering her though.
I wonder why.
I like that
Key
back up there,
moved.
'cause then I didn't have to see
Because-
everybody.
You didn't have to see us. Too bad.
Auditors report?
Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
I do.
This one.
Okay.
On the fund 4509, we got interest for January, February, March, and April. And then on April the 21st, we've got a larger chunk. Or, I'm sorry, April.
2 Aprils and 2 Mays.
And
is
then
that
we
true?
have 2 Mays.
That is because there's 2 different banks and you have to talk to the treasurer about that.
Doesn't it seem weird though, in January, February, and March, we were running about 400, April 1st, we're about 400,
Well,
then it's 1,300.
But you gave her permission to transfer money to a better rate.
Yeah, but then it went, I mean, I don't know, maybe the 1,300 is quarterly interest on the CD? Maybe.
You don't have a CD anymore. You took it all to your,
To the money
savings.
market.
Savings
Okay,
account.
that's 2 million coming back in.
And you have 2 different banks. You have, I believe you have Security Federal and First Merchants.
This seems like it's really interesting. I don't know what the numbers.
I don't know. That's what she gave us to receive and that's what I did.
Okay.
Any other questions? Motion to approve it.
Move to approve the financial report as presented.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
Claims, we have one claim. Claim number 202, from HWC Engineering. $22,987.62.
I don't have it in front of me, but what's our limit for our contract with HWC? Without motion, without additional appropriation?
It's on the budget, I think we just revised.
Yeah, I think it's,
I had it in my head, it was 25,000.
$1,072,100.
No, that's the whole budget,
That's
that's
the whole
construction budget too.
That's not what you're asking?
Yeah, no, we signed a contract last year with HWC that we could just spend, that, as long as we gave authority, he could bill for us to a given amount. I just don't remember what that contract is for off the top of my head, but this is government. I don't remember, but this would have to be approaching that without,
No, it was 145.
145.
for the general services contract, or for this specific project.
This project.
Oh, okay, we're billing out of that, not out of the general services agreement.
Yeah,
Okay.
the general services was 20,000.
Right, but
Yes.
this is this is being billed out of the other contract.
Correct.
Yes.
This is a separate.
I need a motion.
Move to approve claim 202 and $22,987.62.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other claims inventory?
No more claims. You and I think, were on the email list, we're receiving the tax increment report
Yeah.
from Baker Tilly. I think I forwarded it to everybody. Did anybody want a copy now?
I do have an email copy, but I'll take a copy.
Okay.
Did anybody have any questions after looking at their email? Does that mean,
Anybody need a copy?
We have to,
does this need to have any approval or anything on it? Or-
No approval.
Okay.
I just want the commission to be aware of it.
Okay. All right, last meeting, it was voted on the table, the Delphi City proposal for $11,000, our share of $11,000 for, sit down and do a plan for the Bowen ground. Is that what I'm saying, Bowen ground, Bowen ground? So, we need to readdress this. Is there questions for Anita, more in depth or anything about it?
Nothing has changed, still planning on going to a public auction in
That's-
September timeframe.
In the fall is all that we have heard from the owner, so. That's basically all that we know on it.
Yeah.
My question is, there's been a lot, the question was asked the last time, do we really need to do a plan when we got a developer that might come in and just change the whole plan we're doing? My question is, $11,000 for the county seems a little stiff for what's what I'm looking at out there. But we have some kind of an advantage too, that we have partial of this ground is not in the Delphi City TIF district. So we could justify by spending some of the 11,000 or some of the money towards maybe a plan if you would be interested, if the commission is interested in doing that. I guess I'm having a hard time myself thinking of this is, how soon would that be developed once it's bought? And do we have any kind of idea, is there developers that are interested in purchasing it, or have an investor in development out there? And then the other question is what kind of time frame are we looking at that we would want to see some kind of return back on our investment that we put into it?
So, we really don't know, other than the time frame of fall for the auction. Really, I think what the purpose of the concept plan, from the city's point of view, is to create that, vision for what that property could be, and, perhaps use that as we're, establishing residential TIF. Also, as we're establishing people who may want to invest, in the acquisition of that property, perhaps through an opportunity fund. We, are still working on, our rural opportunity, zone initiative, project with Purdue and, Okra and IHCDA. So, we're trying to work several different, pieces all at the same time, with the end goal of making sure that the property is acquired, for residential, primarily for residential development. And, something of this sort, a concept plan, will help us to, attract that, pool of investors. So that's mainly the purpose of the concept plan.
questions? Answers? I'm looking for a motion. Do I have a motion?
I'll just add some input. So I talked to a number of investors, property developers, since our last meeting, and all of them unanimously had the same feedback. They're more interested in what the general geographic area had plans for in growth, much more interested in that than they were in how to develop property. I mean, they know how to develop property, that's what they do on a daily basis. So, what I would like, so from that feedback, didn't give me a great deal of enthusiasm to fund this. But I would also, in the same vein, want to encourage comprehensive planning and very specific comprehensive planning in regards to future infrastructure needs, and which is directly comes back to the RDC and you know, our role for our TIF region, for our TIF area. So I don't think that this fits, but I think that comprehensive planning is very much needed for Carroll County, but specifically in Delphi and in this area. And I would encourage this body to support that in the future, if that same need for funding arises out of comprehensive planning.
Okay. So I hear no motion, then it is dead. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I do not have anything else.
I do.
Barry does, okay.
Mhm. I've revamped revised the budget for 2021 and 2022 based upon new information that I received concerning the construction, lighting, virtual net.
Okay.
That was basically just a change to page 401.
Yeah, I believe I sent everybody copies of the proposed budget.
Right.
And those were my best guesses, best effort to try and figure out when those costs would come into place for 421. They may move a quarter or so, but I think that's what kind of we're shooting on for those costs. when they come in. And you'll see, I think on some of those, our right-of-way costs have come down, because I don't think we're gonna need as much as we initially thought in easement costs. So I think that's a good thing. Our initial thought was over $100,000 to do that engineering, and that's down under 30, or around 30, like I said.
The grand total for the budget estimate for 2021 is $1,406,027.10. Do I have an approval for the budget for 2021?
I move to approve that proposed budget for 2021.
Do I have a second? Questions? Second? Questions?
No, I have a question.
Okay.
Maybe
This is
there was a-
revised.
Well, I printed this off. Barry, what you sent me, you said you had two attachments. One was 1,399,000, and the one he's got is 1,406,000. Maybe there was just a,
You're looking at 22s?
oh, I didn't print the front page.
22 is
Okay.
139.
Yeah, 21 and 22 are different.
Okay,
Yes,
that's what it is.
Based
I
upon
only have the,
long-term debt.
Yeah,
Okay.
21, 22's not. So 21 is for $406,027.10. And we have a motion, I need a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion approved for 2021 budget.
Who seconded?
For 2022 budget, it is $1,399,677.10.
Move to approve the 2022 budget.
Have a second, any other questions on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, okay, motion is carried for 2022 budget.
As a matter of fact, like we have the total US 421 widening project listed on the 2021 budget. I assume that's gonna spend down a little bit, you're gonna pay portions of that. But on the 2022 budget, we have the same total.
Right. Right. Which could change some.
Oh, yeah, I would think.
Right.
I would think it would, yeah. So, it's confusing to me how that will work, but you people will keep me in line.
But it's just a budget.
I will keep it in mind.
I have
Since
that.
this
We
is
have a
gonna
bet.
start going through the budget system, I will have to put that in as a budget. So if you, I don't know what the numbers are, but say you have 100,000 in HWC. If you go over that, then you're gonna have to advertise, just like everyone else, and approve that additional or transfer. I cannot change a budget without those two forms. I don't know, and the other thing too is your 2022 budget will have to go before the council, just like other entities, like the libraries and, township trustees, I believe, that they just overlook them. I mean, they look at them and then they don't approve or disapprove. Or they can't disallow, I guess is what a better word.
So I guess when we get to that point in time,
We
we'll
will
have to
work
submit
on
stuff
that.
to you.
So right now, I would have to start entering that into the computer, so when you have the next bill, I have a line item to pay it out of. I just don't pay it out of disbursements under 4501.
Run that by me again.
Like your 4501 account is to pay your claims.
Right.
That will be in as a budget in the system. So when you file a claim, you're going to put it under 4501, we'll work with you to do the claims correctly and put the number on there so we know where we have to pay that. Because right now, everything just comes out of disbursements.
So, I would say pay out of 4501 and line
Fund
number.
number.
Yes, sir. When I put it in there, I will send you a budget status report that shows you what the numbers are.
Okay,
But if you do not have money in there, you're gonna have to transfer it from another line item up there, and you have no cash. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I think,
It's gonna be a little bit more complicated than it
Cash
is today.
management gets to be a little bit, we have to look a little further ahead from a cash management perspective.
It's a
because-
little more pain.
Because if we, an advertisement has to have a 2 week, or no, it has to have a 10-day lead time. So if we're over a line item, in any given line item, if we're gonna put more money in there, it won't happen until the next month.
right, so
Unless
that's what
you
we gotta look
transfer.
at, is every month we have to say, okay, what do we got coming for the following month, whether we need to say in June, we need to put another $500,000 in 4501, because we know in June, July, we have this many claims coming in. So-
Unless you have a transfers can be done that same day.
Yeah.
Okay,
The thing later on, you wanna know, where do you want me to put that, your settlement is for the next meeting, if you wanna decide where your settlement's gonna go, well, really should do it now. If you want it to go into your 4501, or do you want it to go, you know, and then,
Correct, so every time we approve a claim, we need to specify what was taken out of 4501 or something.
And line.
Right.
so if I put it in your settlement in the 4501, I'm gonna need paperwork now from you and sign to transfer that, or not transfer, but put it in the CCRP savings. So you can't just tell me that, put that in there, you know, you're gonna have to vote on it and tell me and have paperwork.
Gary, you understand all this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, as long as the guy that's putting out the claims to us understands where we're at.
I have a lot of faith in that.
He knows
Just
where-
don't call me
he
on the
knows
night
where to
before.
find me.
Unless you really wanna make
No.
life complicated.
I mean, you are going, you know, usually in the past, you've gotten, what, 400,000, 450.
Yeah.
So I didn't know where, usually we just put it in 4501.
Right.
So if you wanna instruct me now to put it in 4509, you can, and I can just deposit it there, I think. I would have to double check that, but.
I think everything will wait till next month, when we kinda get our
Well,
sea legs.
that's
I think
what
we're in good shape until the next month, and then we'll sit
Yeah,
down,
you need to, by next month, because
Yeah.
settlement will be done in June.
or I'll call you or June first and say, hey, you got transfer money.
And I'll say you have to wait till your meeting.
All right, thank you, Beth. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Oh,
You need a copy of your budgets. Those ones you sent me. I mean, the ones you sent me are the corrected ones that they did today.
I believe so.
I have.
I'll get you. Let's make sure. Okay.
Okay.
Next thing is Jake, you wanna give us some updates and stuff, I guess you might wanna tell everybody, I think about everybody from RDC was at the meeting the other night, so.
Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of forward the residential TIF discussion. Just trying to set expectations about what you guys want from the Economic Development Corporation. Obviously, the concept of residential TIF has been discussed even prior to my arrival. And we're trying to help you identify how we can best use redevelopment dollars and use the resources we have within the commission to spur residential growth. So the discussion was had, we had a nice, I think 50 folks came out to the church to hear about residential TIF and bringing Baker Tilly to use, what we did essentially was use a projected analysis of a residential development with it wasn't necessarily in the county, but with the town of Flora, and look at how the redevelopment commission would use residential TIF to recoup dollars or use dollars in those areas. And so I'm hoping that you guys that were there had a basic understanding, and hopefully my goal was to make sure that it was clearly understood. Were there any questions about anything I covered at the meeting, and I'd be willing to address now, or we can talk one-on-one, but overall it went really well. From our standpoint, from the EDC standpoint, I got numerous emails and texts and phone calls afterwards, talking about how great the discussion was, and it was worthwhile. And great questions, Paul, right? Stuff that maybe we just didn't get a chance to cover in that meeting, so, and we're starting to iron all those things out. So really where we're at now between our organization and the commission is to figure out where the next steps lie, and what would you like our organization to begin to do. To us, the next steps would be that we need to begin the process of establishing a residential TIF. And those steps would be to clearly work directly with the political subdivisions involved, so the towns, the schools, to begin to identify the TIF areas and press forward with that. So, and I think we've budgeted costs.
You, because not everyone here was at that meeting, you might, or
we might find it beneficial to kind of revisit what the process of establishing residential TIF is. You touched upon it a little bit there at the meeting, and identifying properties and just a brief overview of that again. Can you touch upon that?
Yeah, so as I understand it now, the commission would begin the process of establishing a residential TIF by passing that in motion, and then it would end with you guys by passing it in resolution as well. So, I think, matter of fact, it would probably start with the resolution in the beginning and then end in the resolution as well.
And then it has to go to commissioners and council and then after that.
Correct, yeah, so each political subdivision that is, would be involved would have to approve. So if this commission says, Jake, we would like to go ahead and proceed forward with establishing residential TIF areas, we would work with the attorneys, get the engagement letter set up so that we can bring the resolution to the commission, basically certifying that you're ready to begin the process. And then at that point, we would begin to go through the steps. The first would be to the schools to make sure there's consensus. So just because you say we're establishing a residential TIF by resolution does not mean that it's merely just created. So the law states that we have to follow proper steps. And so the next steps, we would go to the schools and we would go to them with essentially the same resolution, the same understanding, and then we would work through a resolution with the school as well to approve that. And then work through each individual entity at that point with the townships that are involved. If not by resolution, they'll be involved anyways. And then the towns and the cities as well. So if we're establishing anything within the corporate boundaries, we would go to the town council, city council, seek their approval. Obviously, their portions would be different, right? So with the town, like if we use the town of Florida, if 3 of the parcels of the residential TIF fell within that, they would have to agree upon in the resolution those particular parcels that were within their political subdivision. We would need the county's approval, obviously, for theirs. And so that's where we would do it. So start here, next would be the schools, and then we would follow along through the political subdivisions by resolution, so they would be passing it.
So how does one go about identifying those properties? And is that done prior to resolution, or is you have a resolution, then you go out and start looking for properties to identify that would satisfy that goal?
So, and the legislature, the law really doesn't define on which steps come first. I think I would want guidance from this commission and other political subdivisions. My goal is to not just draw lines, draw a map, and then just say, here you go, this is where we feel like is gonna be residential development areas. And that needs to be able to provide, there needs to be input along the way for that area, because I feel like the schools are gonna have input. I believe that the towns and the cities are gonna have input on where they see their highest growth potential areas are. We, as an economic development corporation, would like to think that we have a fair idea, because it's what we do on a daily basis. And so we're gonna provide some input to the towns and to the schools to say, here's where the infrastructure is, here's where we're seeing a lot of inquiries on growth, here's where we're getting the most demand. And so we want to identify this area as a place that we feel that over the next 10 to 15 years are gonna see residential development. That would be the idea. So to answer your question, I think that we have a notion of where we want to be, but as we work through the resolution process, we would be actually hammering down the parcels in which would fall within that residential TIF area, using our financial analysis folks to be able to pull out what they think the potential growth in AV would be for that area. And then by the time it gets back to the commission, at the end, you'll have a full financial analysis on each parcel that's within that area. So we will know if you've designated 25 parcels, there's gonna be 30 homes potentially in that parcel, in that area. And here's the expected revenue back to the commission or the political entities that would be receiving those funds at the end of that time frame.
So how many areas, how many political subdivisions, how many locations within the county? What would you expect that to look like?
I think based upon Flora right now, we're probably looking between 8 to 10 parcels on the south side of Flora. For Burlington, we're looking at maybe 4 to 6 parcels. I guess it'd be on the southwest portion of town. Delphi, we're looking certainly to the south because of US aggregates, and we're kind of landlocked to the north. So we'll want to include properties that have either been inquired for development, but we'd be potentially moving south for Delphi as well. South, southwest possibly as well, so. Yes, and then there'll be some properties possibly, near Camden. I haven't really, there's not been a lot of demand for residential development in the Camden area on a scalability standpoint, so getting with, Brent and Mark and their town council to say, hey guys, if we see residential in Flora, do we have landowners that are in the next 10 years looking to possibly develop their property? And if so, we would like to include this into this one-time establishment of a TIF, a residential TIF area. And then if not, then we would obviously not include them. So I think the idea of having a full-blown map and passing it and getting it through all the entities that it needs to, I think would be a lack of foresight, because we want them to have input. I would want them to have input. Even after our meeting the other night, 3 different parcels, rather large parcels, became available for development, and discovered at that meeting, which is why we have these discussions, right? Is if there's a point that a landowner is looking to use their resource for development, then we want to be friends of theirs, because we can help them make sure they get the most value out of their property, and in return get the most value for our community. So I think that as long as we have these discussions as we move along and this thing begins to take shape, that we will identify and uncover a little more than we even know now. So did that answer your question? That was a really long answer, but
That's good. I'm used to that.
it's not I don't know.
It's not an easy question to answer. There's a lot of things to unfold and a lot of work to be done to be able to address that. It's simple as you're saying.
Yeah, sorry, please.
And one other, I guess, thing in my thought process before Josh asks questions. One thing we didn't really touch on at that public meeting, and I'm glad you kind of limited it to an hour, cut it off at an hour, because we could have gone on way too long, and a lot of good questions and responses there. But that what I didn't hear much of is, that kind of public-private partnership, bringing a developer in, bringing a home builder in, how that would, the mechanics of that, what would that look like, how would that work? The redevelopment doesn't own any ground for residential TIF, and it doesn't build houses, so you have to rely on private-public partnership there to get that done. How is that gonna work? How's that gonna work?
yeah, I think that we've got to, the way we have to look at residential TIF, and my understanding of and it's new, right? So every day we're taking in new decisions, and I'm talking to my colleagues across the state to say, how are you guys handling this from an economic development standpoint? The partnership, we want to be able to create, and I believe economic development is not government driven. I believe that economic development is strictly just creating an environment that is suitable for growth. And so residential TIF is one of those tools that allows for a developer to engage in their work in a community. I think where we're gonna find that public-private partnership is going to be, if we're able to establish the TIFs, the areas in which we feel that the community has agreed in general that this is an area for residential growth, that we're bringing developers to that area specifically, and then they know at that point that they have resources available to them to help realize, I guess, the development. And that would be bringing in the towns as well, the cities as well. So if we're near Flora, we're near Camden, we're near Delphi. That allows for a centralized point for them to convene and meet with the RDC. So basically, we will be the developer's rep in relation to the RDC as well. So I don't want this to be a subsidy plan for developers, but we want them to know that we are serious about residential growth in our community. There is a need for homes. There are resources available, And we want to make sure that they're going through the EDC specifically, if we're gonna make this happen, that they can go through the EDC and get access to the redevelopment commissions, the city of Delphi, the towns, things like that, to make it easier for because that regulatory piece is a barrier, and as some of you guys know, we wanna be able to navigate that for them. And so, having residential TIFs allow us to have focused areas of residential development, and having access to any resources they need. I mean, they may ask for help for infrastructure, or, I'll use an example, interest-free loans has been stuff that's been made available, using the capital from the commission to provide interest-free loans. So, whether that's secured loan through the bank and then they're borrowing from a local entity, that's a way that can be done. And one of the main things I've seen happen is that residential TIFs and redevelopment commissions can make sure that residential developments get realized as quickly as they possibly can. And so if you're providing financial support for a developer, if that partnership were to happen, if we have a developer for 18 acres within the residential TIF area, they say, hey Jake, we really wanna build over there, or we wanna develop the land, we have some builders that we're gonna bring in, or we are a builder developer, so we're gonna build our own homes, they'll be pre-sold, we really need help with the sewers, that's an area where if you guys can cover X amount of the sewers, or we can loan X amount of sewers, that'll give us free up capital to be able to do the project faster. And if that's the case, then we had a community that actually forgave some of the debt because the developer met the timelines that was agreed upon within the partnership. So if they can get 25 homes in that lot in 36 months, then they were able to forgive 25% of the debt that was outlaid on the infrastructure. Because you're gonna realize that money faster because it got developed faster. And so what we don't want is to establish development areas that just sit and linger, and developers don't have the cash to carry developments that long. Or if they are, then they're in a better place than maybe people that do it for a living. So that's the thought process. That's the partnership, is allow us to be able to drive these development areas home, be able to go pitch them, go sell them. I mean, if I'm working on an industrial project and we have 3 or 4 residential TIF areas identified clearly as areas for residential development, that in itself is one more tool that we could have to shop our community with. So housing and workforce is obviously a huge need when it comes to the industrial side of things that we do on a daily basis, but having this in place is gonna be valuable for bringing those partnerships to roll.
So it could take, who knows what it would look like to answer that question, that public-private partnership, or who contributes what. But it wouldn't necessarily look anything like the Hoosier Heartland an industrial development site that we have currently, where redevelopment went in and put in streets and utilities, and then, recoup maybe some of the lot sale proceeds. It might look entirely different than that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the goal is to not seek infrastructure funding unless we had a developer at the table and a contract signed. So if they were gonna acquire the land and needed any resources, public resources, that they would be obligated to any of that debt. It wouldn't just be us going in and saying, hey guys, we have a swath of land, can you put in, power, water, and sewer, and I'll go find a developer to fill that area. So no, yeah, that would never be the model that I would want. We already have an industrial park right now that we're sitting in that same circumstance. So no, I think that the goal is to provide the environment, allow them a conduit to get access to resources, and then if they need us, if we don't spend one penny of redevelopment dollars and we're able to build record amount of homes this year, then we'll all high five and be great. So I don't want to use taxpayer dollars to make this happen. Unfortunately, our neighbors and all across the state, they're leveraging every asset and resource to get it done. And I feel that we need to be in a position to compete with them. But if we can get this done on a market scale and not, we're okay with that. So.
Josh, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna add on to what he was talking about. I mean, the examples that Baker Tilly was given in there were showing no recuperation, from the developer.
Just the
That's
capture of the
just-
tax dollars.
and yeah, so I mean, that's kind of like the worst case scenario. So, and from their perspective, that's what they have to do, right? I mean, they're saying, you know, this is the dollars and cents of ins and outs for the TIF application, or that, you know, every deal is different, and every deal is gonna come before this body to say, you know, yes, we'll do this for this one, and they can be totally different, you know, I mean, every deal is different. Unfortunately or unfortunately, it's just kind of the nature of the beast of residential, because, we're dealing on a different scale than we are on industrial sites, and a different, I mean, it's nothing for an industrial developer to come in and spend $2 million on dirt work. That's kind of expected, right? But you're not gonna get that same amount of dirt work done and make residential development work. Cash flows just don't make sense. So, it's different and it's new, but I mean, the first point I was gonna make, or your original question, I think that, you know, the reason that it makes sense for this body to have the RDC or the EDC involved is because, we have a number of hoops that have to get jumped through. I mean, first we gotta get approval from the state to even do it. And, you know, we talked to Barnes and Thornburg about that some number of months ago. And then after that, all these lines have to get drawn. And it's, you know, if we don't have somebody working on this, and at least working on it between meetings and then bringing it back to us, it's gonna take forever to get the paperwork done. So, you know, from my perspective, it makes a ton of sense to say, yes, we'll approve it, yes, we'll fund it, you guys go do it, and then we'll meet on this until it gets done.
Barry? Yeah, I just wanted to say, I attended the presentation last Wednesday, and I was very impressed with what Jake presented on the subject matter. And also the Baker Tilly representative. You did an excellent job there, Jake. Now I have a question. Our mantra, the commission's mantra, has always been to spend the money, you've gotta have some direct benefit to the TIF. Direct and indirect, well, that would take all sorts of connections. But to go to and say, I wanna fund this residential development area in any, I mean, whether it's infrastructure, purchasing the property, or whatever, and use TIF funds that presently exist in this industrial zone, does it have to be the direct benefit or indirect benefit to that industrial TIF?
Yeah, so the 19's, as my understanding of 19's legislation, it allows us to spend this, the Indiana Packers TIF in these HOTIFs, what they call the housing TIFs. And so as long as we, like you said, as long as we can tie direct benefit to these residential development areas to Indiana Packers, then it is guaranteed to be taken care of. I guess not guaranteed. So that's the benefit of having this new legislation, is for us to be able to use these dollars indirectly and directly for housing for the Indiana Packers TIF. So and so those are the questions, Barry, that I asked initially, was like, well, we can spend this money here and here and here, and how do I justify the Indiana Packers TIF? And the legislation clearly outlines that us building homes 7 miles away from our largest employer is, they can draw a direct correlation, and the attorneys say that. So Barnes and Thornburg recall says that I can justify all these areas and tie them directly to Indiana Packers. And I don't believe, and you're right, I don't believe everybody's gonna be able to do what we do and how we do it. So, because our largest employer is 20% of our employment, we commute 40% of our workforce every morning. Those are the legal indicators that are justifiable by the attorneys to say, this type